Oh, I just have to say thank you for getting rid of the loan thing. I hated that rule from the beginning. I thought it was ripe for collusion. I think it is great that we've gotten rid of the ability to loan players to teams. Thank you for that one.
There we go. Look at that. 4 criticisms and a positive. I'll take it. That's a great Zane scorecard.
For conversations,
4
and
conversations.
and then the other stuff we're just asking questions. I mean, just trying to understand, to educate our audience. All right.
I love it. I love it.
Grow up.
How many cracked pickleballs have you tossed in the trash lately? Too many, right? Komodo Pickleball has a solution, the BioBall. It's the world's first USAPA approved biodegradable pickleball that lasts up to 5 times longer than standard balls, up to 70 games, thanks to technology that prevents them from going out of round so fast. Consistent bounce, superior control, and eco-friendly. Win for your game, win for the planet. Get your BioBalls at komodopickleball.com or visit the link in the description. Let's keep our courts green, one rally at a time. That's KOMODO pickleball.com.
Well, you guys ready to rock?
So, Samin, you join UPA, Chief Strategy Officer, and all of a sudden shit hits the fan, and there's like infinity new rules in Major League Pickleball. So, how'd that all come to pass?
Well, first of all, let's not speak in hyperbole. Infinity is a ridiculous thing to throw out there in the opening sentence of all this. Clearly, you've been hanging out with Zane too long. But the thing that like stood out for why we wanted to put some of these changes out there are, one, let's all just remember that we're in like January and we're actually telling our audience and our fans and our players what's happening like 3 months away, which is pretty incredible given where we were a year ago relative to where we are today. And the second is we're on this march towards trying to build Major League Pickleball to be the next major sports league, and look at the NBA and the NFL and Major League Baseball. And we have to remind ourselves that we started in a format that was more festival style and individual events with individual winners. So I think that progression doesn't happen overnight. Like, we stood up 2024 as fast as we could. But now that we had some time and thought that we were able to put into what this needs to look like going forward, that's why you see some of the changes that you saw. I wouldn't call them infinity, but like 10 feels like a good number. Let's go with 10 changes.
Yeah.
Zane, just professional podcasting tip: we can hear you when you type.
Okay, that is good to know. I was taking notes on the
FYI.
more festival style. My mic is doing really well, guys.
Yeah, audio's good.
Samin, what's wrong with festival style?
There's 2 parts to that in my mind make festival style difficult. The first is you have these like immense like ebbs and flows that I think you could argue are good for the audience, but at the same time, like, I think get exhaustive and like dilute the meaning of every single one. The other part, people like to compare it to like Formula One as like an example. But if you were just to look at hours of live content from Formula One, it's 25 races times 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever sort of average race time is. They put out like 50 hours of live television or 75 hours of live television. Major League Pickleball will never be that. So we have to get people to care about sort of the amount and volume of matches that we have going on in a way that's exciting and compelling and sort of create storylines throughout. And I think it's really hard to do that in a festival style format. And by the way, it's like why, I would argue like the NFL and Premier League have probably hit this like perfectly, where they're on this balance of number of games in a regular season with sort of meaning for every game. And like they've like nailed that inflection point, and we're trying to do the same thing. I think we're getting closer. Like, I don't think we'll ever have 70 MLP regular season matches. But at the same time, we want people to care as much about, the squeeze playing the fives in April as they do in June. And like one way to do that is to set it up the way we did.
So the regular season, more of the regular season format, hosted by the local teams, which I think is super cool. When this is all said and done, Where do you think we end up in terms of regular season matches? MLB has 162 games. NBA has around 82 now. You can't necessarily say 82, right? You'd probably guess that both of those are a little bit too high. Where do you think MLP comes in? Where do you think the sweet spot is eventually for regular season matches?
I think if you had to ask me today, my favorite is the Premier League, which is everyone plays everyone twice, once at home and once on the road. So there's 20 teams in that league. Premier League, for those that aren't familiar, is English soccer, English football. It's where Manchester United and Manchester City and Chelsea and all of them compete. And they play everyone twice. So they have 38, regular season matches. But in addition to that, they have these tournaments that take place throughout their season. The FA Cup, Champions League, the Emirates Cup, the Caribou Cup. Like, they've got these inevitable sort of crescendos of competition that are woven in throughout their season that I think are really compelling and really exciting. So I think that's like a really interesting one. The NFL, like, just physically, they like can't actually
Right.
let everyone play that many games because you're taking a beating on Sundays. But you have seen them increase. Like, let's all just
Mhm.
take a step back and acknowledge the fact they added a week. They're probably going to add another week. They added a playoff team. Like, they also are realizing that they may be on the too few side of the spectrum.
Sure. Yeah, it's so physical though. That one's a tougher argument, I'm sure. But Thomas, can I, as a professional podcaster, can I have your permission to just get into the shit that people want to hear?
Yeah, I love it. I feel like we should make that a rule of thumb.
All right, Samin, what the hell is up? Why did we get rid of rally scoring?
I can't wait to actually have this conversation with you. There's two reasons. One, there are 40 million people, whatever you want to cite, 30, 40, 50. There's like a handful of statistics out there of people that play pickleball. 99.9% of them play one way. And as a result, there's this barrier to entry, and we've all experienced it, right? Like, oh, like, check out rally scoring. It's like, how does rally scoring work? Like, who's serving, who's receiving, if the person's played pickleball before. And I think we were trying to reverse into appealing to the masses that weren't playing pickleball versus the amount of people that you would argue are sort of a built-in endemic audience. And I actually say, like, that's was probably the right stance to take when MLP was founded, because there weren't 30, 40, 50 million people playing. Remember, there was like what was the MO was like road to 30 by 30, 2030 or something like that, right? And then they like
Yeah,
hit it the next year and they're like, what? So in my mind, like, it made sense at the time the decision was made to go with rally scoring, and easier to understand format for the casual consumer who maybe doesn't play pickleball. Now all of a sudden we're seeing like 15% of tennis courts are converted to pickleball courts. Like, the amount of people that are playing is astronomically higher than where it was when the league was founded in 2021. And so we had this barrier to entry for how people who play pickleball could understand MLP. And I think it was important to really clearly understand who we're going after. And I think the like casual pickleball player is probably the right first group to go after, especially when there's as many of them as there are. So like that's
sure.
like
But
overarching reason one.
yeah, that's fair. 99% of people do play regular scoring, but regular scoring is so much more difficult to figure out than rally scoring for the most part, right? So you've already gotten somebody who's figured out regular scoring. It can't be that hard for somebody who knows regular pickleball scoring to figure out rally.
Yeah, but it's harder. Like, your argument is like,
Sure,
how
it
much
is.
harder?
It is
But
a.
it
It is harder. There is a jump there. I won't disagree with you there.
And then the second part of this was, as we build out what I feel like are all of the things around the game that we need to create in order to make it easier to follow, easier to understand. That's like everything from like a live score ticker on our website to sports betting to integration into other sports apps. Like, this entire tech stack was developed around side out scoring, and will make it much easier for us to accomplish a lot of those things by also utilizing side out scoring. Now, I'm not saying like rally is dead. Like, it's not necessarily the right time to have it, because I think if we get to a point where we capture that 30, 40, 50 million, audience, or a portion of it, or a meaningful portion of it, like, maybe we look to adjust. But for now, Like that audience combined with the ability to explain this easily in other channels and in other platforms to fans, I think we like have to acknowledge that that's like step one.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, I understand that. And I think that a lot of the, as you mentioned, a lot of the tech is supporting traditional scoring. It's interesting to say that we're not fully married to regular scoring, and it will continue to be revisited. From just my perspective, I do like the idea of a point going on the board every time a rally occurs. I think that probably a good chunk of viewers would as well. And I think that I've said it for a little while on the podcast. I think that our current form of rally scoring that we play in MLP or played in MLP was deeply flawed, particularly with the freeze. I can't think of another competitive sport where only one team can score at the end of a game, right? And so I've said for a while it makes for great viewing because matches become artificially closer, but from a competitive standpoint, it's a pretty brutal rule. And so for me, I was like, well, I think having matches artificially closer will help people want to watch. And maybe that's a trade-off that we're willing to make in the early stages of the pro sport. But eventually I figured that rule would be changed. I also don't particularly like how there's no stacking involved in Major League Pickleball. It's a huge piece of strategy that we see in other sport or in the other format. So it is interesting that, like, I think there are certainly some pros, right? You know that a match is going to be somewhere between, like, 18 and 22 minutes, pretty much like clockwork, which I think is huge for broadcast and just knowing, how long something is going to planning, how long something is going to be going for. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think the initial hurdle of just let's get people to watch, maybe let's meet them where they're at with regular scoring is important, but I like that you've left. It seems to me that you've left the window open for reevaluation there because I do think long term rally scoring, I think, creates a more compelling and consistent product with certain problems that need to be fixed, like the freeze and like stacking.
Yeah, I think that's all like totally fair. And it's the second to last thing we said, which is like meet people where they are. Like we all know a ton of people are playing. We're seeing it in our communities or when we go out or whatever it might be. And pro pickleball just like needs to solve its awareness first. And like eyeballs, 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 like and understanding to an extent. And so I think we gotta like start there and then get to exactly what you said, like how does this fit the media window best? How does it fit like a 2 hour time slot? Like what does all of that look like? But I am a believer in this is 100% the right step today. And it's the freeze point that you said, it stuck out to me as well, just as like a level of excitement that comes, right? And sort of the artificialness of close games. I also think there's this benefit to side out where there's that like hope factor that we've all felt. Like you could be down 10-0, but if you get that serve back, you're like, all right, we got a chance. Like I might be able to come back here.
Mm-hmm.
And so side out in a sort of elegant way achieves that, oh, like, well, they're down 10-0 2, but they just won that point. Now it's 0-10-1. Like maybe they can make a run here. Maybe even the team's like, all right, we're not out of it yet, right? And so you kind of are able to toe that line between having some excitement, some belief that like the match isn't over, so I want to continue to tune in, while having also a fair, to your point, scoring system where one team wasn't getting penalized for building a lead too early.
Yeah, well, you're an NBA guy. The way that I used to explain that rule was imagine the team that's winning for the last minute in an NBA game can then only score points by hitting threes or dunking, right?
You
Limiting the
took
amount
that
of
from
ways.
me. I told you that analogy. We were in some tournament, God knows where. I'm pretty sure I told you that. So you better credit me on that one.
I'll credit you just because I really don't remember. um, but Okay, so yes, I think the logic makes sense. The fans don't quite care for the decision, at least in the meantime. According to a Pickleball Inc. poll, about 2/3 of fans said that they preferred rally scoring over traditional scoring for Major League Pickleball. And don't take my word for it. Take the poll on Pickleball Inc. Do you think
Yeah,
that's going to be a turnoff for the core fans initially, or how do you reconcile that?
I like it's hard to reconcile without like understanding sample size and all that. But like again, I like come to the let's all accept the fact that the amount of people that tune in and play and follow, excuse me, not play, but tune in and follow pro pickleball is a small fraction of the broader addressable audience. And so that broader addressable audience is the one we're going after. And who I think we should, like me in this seat, like we should be going after. And so I loved rally scoring, and I'm the one sitting here like arguing that we should do something different because I actually believe it. And so yeah, look, will the following of Zane Navratil, lean more towards rally scoring? Probably. But it'd be like interesting if like Ben Johns put up that poll. I bet you a bunch of his followers would be like side out scoring is the way to go. So it's like hard to
I didn't put up the poll.
fully.
Pickleball Inc. put up the poll.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And by the way, you still got rally scoring in the Dream Breaker, so little conceit there. But I do think we'll have a much better chance, especially as we like nail our media strategy and get in front of more eyeballs and believe that okay, like we'll have more windows on ESPN and Fox and potentially locally and others. The barrier to entry should be, oh, like I saw that pickleball is on. I play pickleball. Let me tune in. Oh, I understand exactly what's going the first second I tune in for the first time.
Yeah. Okay. I got you. Well, as long as we're not ruling it out for forever, I'll be all right.
Yeah, I think that's a fair takeaway from this entire conversation.
Tommy, it looked like you wanted to chime in with something a little bit ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just say the thing that Samin's not going to say, which is because I don't have to care about this kind of thing, but like, who cares about what the core fan thinks about an intricacy like the scoring format? It doesn't really matter. You need to think about the broader audience. Samin said it, right? And plus, people who have an allegiance to Major League Pickleball and love it and follow it, they're going to hate change, right? This is one of the unique things about Major League Pickleball. And if you change that, they're going to protest. The people who are even going to vote on that poll would have an opinion in the first place, which means they probably watch a ton of Major League Pickleball. And if you change something that's core to what makes it unique, they're going to, protest against that. But ultimately, I don't think it really matters. Okay, I think we've all played with that guy who will literally halt play to dry his hands off on a towel. We've all been there. Sweaty high five, the slippery paddle, the sudden urge to sanitize your entire being. In pickleball, sweaty hands are the enemy, but not anymore. 4On Total Grip Spray is here to save the day and your grip. A quick spritz on your hand or paddle gives you instant, rock-solid grip. No sticky residue, no weird smells, just pure, unadulterated control. So ditch the slip and slide and grab some 4On Total Grip Spray. Visit the link in the description to try it for yourself, or go to 4on.se. That's the number 4on.se.
Love it. Well, I have some other things to argue with you about, Samin.
Let's do
But
it.
I did appreciate the justification. I think a lot of this comes from I haven't had these conversations with you or any of the MLP, PPA, UPA executives. So a lot of it is genuinely me trying to understand the rationale for some of these changes, like you've mentioned. So, a couple of the other things that we'll discuss are definitely going to be player eligibility, expansion of rosters, more or less going down the list of these competition structure updates. So first one being only players under UPA contract will be eligible to play in Major League Pickleball events. Understand the logic behind this one, right? Like you have to have a contract with the UPA in order to play. I think a worry with some is that this is going to be used as a leverage point. Like, hey, you've got to sign with us and you've got to play a certain amount of events, or you can't have this MLP format to sort of break out. And we have seen a bunch of breakout players come from Major League Pickleball. I think most recently you have, back to 2023, we had Paris Todd breaking out on the BLQK team. 2020, that was 2022. 2023, we had Rachel Rohrabacher. This year we had Will Howells, Kate Fahey. So like, it does seem like people can make a name for themselves in MLP. And I think a big worry is, if we're only allowing UPA players to play here, are we still going to have the ability to see these players break out?
Yeah, so I think 100% yes. And I'll say sort of why in a second. But the theory behind why we pushed for this, and why this change, in my mind, is really important is we're trying to build a business here. And if you're in, like, you got to be all the way in. There's no more like, I'm going to pick this side of the house, I'm going to pick that side of the house. Like, if you're in, we need everyone, from the people that work here to the people that produce our events to the players that compete. Like, you're all the way in. You're playing PPAs, you're playing MLPs. I What gets me excited and optimistic about what you just talked about is, so the opportunity to break out, is we're also giving players more of a chance, right? We're expanding rosters. We're saying, hey, instead of 88 players being drafted, that number is actually going to be closer to, I think, 120. And so as a result, the opportunity to be a part, to compete, to have a chance is larger. And it also gives us a chance to say, all right, teams may have been hesitant in the past to make a waiver wire move because it was something around the boundaries. Oh, I don't want to take a chance on maybe a Michael Lloyd because I don't know what he's going to be like in rally scoring. But turns out the kid has a ton of talent. And he's like really, really good. And if we had rosters of 6 last year, he probably would have emerged earlier. And so I kind of like bifurcate the why you need to be on a UPA contract versus will we still be able to have emerging talent, emerging players? Because in the former, the theory is, if you're in, you're all the way in. And like, you gotta be a part of everything we're trying to build. So if a fan is a fan of Zane on the PPA, he also gets to see him in MLP, and vice versa. On the opportunity side, I think a big part of it, I've heard you say this a lot, it like kind of boils down to like pairings in a lot of way on the PPA tour side, where like if you land a good partner, you like increase your probability of success in a meaningful way.
Mm-hmm.
And what was always great about MLP is like, it wasn't just the best pairing with the best, right? There was some amount of parity to where, oh, all of a sudden, like Zane and Will, top men's team, sort of the second half of the year, as they sort of figured it out on the MLP side, when like maybe in the PPA tour, we could all discuss and debate like how good would they have been. And so what we're
We would have been taking
doing,
titles left and right.
there we go. I love to hear it. So what we're doing is we're saying, yes, you need to be all the way in, but we're also going to extend that opportunity to more players so that they have a chance to practice with top talent, potentially be slotted in for an event if another player can't make it. And so in my mind, like they do go hand in hand, but the reason for doing them was sort of fundamentally different, in the good way, I would argue, for both.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I completely understand from a business perspective, you've got to have the players who are participating signed. But does that also come with, are there specific MLP only deals? Like you can sign
No.
for MLP? I think, okay, that's been rumored out there. So that's good to clear up. The rumor was you can sign a deal for be MLP specific. So if that's not the case, why, somebody that I watched a little bit, a couple of weeks ago at the APP tournament was the player Sofia Sewing. I don't know how to say her last name, or if I'm butchering that. Really, really talented pro tennis player who's converting over and taking it seriously. Why would she sign with you now? Like, this is hypothetical. Why would she sign with UPA now before she's had breakout results? Why would she sign herself up to be a part of UPA when she could, grind, start winning APP tournaments and then renegotiate it, probably get paid more.
Yeah, so I think the big reason for why, and like this is my message to many players out there who are like looking to get in, is the platform. Like I like Thomas always like cites sort of hard metrics, which is one of my favorite things about his balance with you on this podcast. Like go look at the PPA and the MLP's social following relative to other leagues. And like we could all just like use that as a version of the truth and you'd be like, okay, it's like meaningfully higher, right? And so the more that you're on those platforms, the more you're seen, the more opportunity you have from a sponsorship, viewership, fan base standpoint to like grow your brand, which I think is also really important. We have way more TV coverage than almost every single other pickleball league, at least that I'm aware of, and we're going to continue increasing that. So to me, it's a bet on the platform, knowing that we can provide really, really, really clear metrics and overview on how ours is better. And we've invested in that. Like that's the whole point of building a business. At the same time, you see this dynamic in other sports leagues. Like there are players in the EuroLeague who make more than the NBA. Whether they play in the Turkish league, whether they play in Spain, Nikola Mirotic like took a deal as an NBA player for more to go play in Spain because his perceived value to that league was higher. So like you're going to have this dynamic where in the early stages of pickleball, so it's going to happen a little bit more, but it also happens across sports. I think what we want to try and really accomplish is a clear focus on like who we're investing in and helping them build out what they're doing. Like Zane is a perfect example of this from a face of MLP, like goat of MLP. Like there's clearly something he's drinking or pouring in his teammates' drinks that like leads to success in the team format. And that's a great thing. That's like we want to tell that story. Zane should want to tell that story. Should like double down on that story. And we are now increasing the amount of people that will see that story. I think when the example of Sofia and others, like, yes, will their value potentially be higher in other places? Yes. Are you willing to bet on the platform and the dollars that it could lead to and take, a contract with, in my mind, definitively the best pickleball league in the world and see and bear the fruits of that? Like, I think that's worth it, but like, you're never going to get 100% of people to like see it that way.
Sure. I think that obviously the UPA is by far the most established. What does an entry? Are you able to say what an entry level contract looks like, or what a league minimum contract is with UPA?
We're like working on it. This one for me is really important. We like haven't pinned it down perfectly yet. I think a part of that is because of just the realities of all the contracts that we inherited, right? Like you have this sort of
Sure.
odd staggering in value versus like value to the sport versus value that you're getting compensated to financially. And like people will always like benchmark to the thing that's better for them. Oh, if I'm like not really good, but someone else is not really good, like I should be making what they make. So we're working on it. And the goal is to like make it such that it's like transparent and clear. And like, if I do this, this, and this, like I get X dollars. Will we
Sure.
get
So
there
there is
before
some
like,
incentive based like
oh
worked
yeah,
in there
yeah, yeah,
rather
yeah.
than the full guarantee.
Yeah, that's the goal. It's like land in somewhere in that realm. At the same time, like I've emphasized this internally a ton and externally, we really want to make sure we're like doing this thoughtfully and not like a mad rush that we all inherited via
Mhm.
the tour wars that led to a scramble, and I don't think was, it clearly wasn't good for a lot of players. So the goal is to have that, like a minimum contract. The NBA has a minimum contract. The NFL has a minimum contract. Like we want to have our version of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main argument that I'm hearing from these players that probably if the money is equal, I'm assuming pretty much everybody or a vast majority of players are going to be signing on with UPA. But we also do have the huge contract burden of the tour wars, and you're always going to be comparing yourself to, well, look, I'm a better player than X, Y, or Z. Somebody in Will's position, right? Like, look, I'm better than half of these, if not more than half of these contracted players that are making 10x what you offered me. Like, you know, that's a tough spot to be in. Um, but so I think that, you know, somebody like a Sophia, if it's, you also have to get paid if you're going to be doing this as your full-time job, as she would want to. So I understand both sides of that, and I think if UPA can have some sort of league minimum, I would imagine the people that are on the fence of wanting to play one or the other would probably be much more understanding of your argument of the exposure and the establishment.
Yeah, and I layer onto that, like, there's a benefit to being a primary domestic league, right? I think the APP's, seen some of that. I don't know if they're running it back for their London event this year versus last year. We're dabbling internationally, but 85%, 90%, exact number is our domestic. And so like Zane gets the chance to like play 90% of his career domestically, and then like the fun occasional hey to Australia, hey to Europe, etc. Like I think we'll always sort of aim to have. The NBA has this, the NFL has this. Like it's no secret. Like you sort of want to be able to do some of that, but I do think that's the other part of this entire pitch is like we want you to be all in. We want to make it easy on you from a burden standpoint as it relates to travel and everything else from living your personal life. And we also want to be able to offer you a minimum contract, an opportunity to get your foot in the door if you achieve X, Y, and Z, like make a living. And if you work your way up, like amazing. And like we're just in this transition zone from like what we inherited to like where we want to be. And like we're getting closer. And it's working business wise, which is great. We just need to do it thoughtfully.
Yeah, I gotcha. Well, it's a lot of the things and are a little bit screwed up from Tour Wars. Like, I mean, from your perspective, I think that pay structures are different between individual sports and team sports, right? I would imagine come 2027 when most of the contracts are up, you would have a salary from your Major League Pickleball team, and then the PPA events, I would guess, are completely incentive based again, or primarily incentive based again with prize money. Would you say that that's a fair guess for the sport going forward, or are we just going to be contracts for forever?
Yeah, I think that's right. Like it'll be some portion fixed, some portion variable. Like that, I believe structurally, if you got like I don't know, you might have worked in consulting before. If you got like a Deloitte consultant to like, go deep on your business, like, what should you do? They like probably like charge you like $4 million and like give you the answer I just gave you in like 4 seconds.
Exactly.
Um,
I won't
and
charge you
so
anything for that advice. I mean,
Perfect. Thank you, Zane. And so I believe that's the right framework. And it's like trying to balance the floor that which we need to provide to our talent in order for them to make a living with sort of the upside, eat what you kill, like you go and become, a number one, number two player. We want you to earn that way. But yeah, structurally, I agree with you. Like that's probably the biggest takeaway in all of this is like some portion fixed, some portion variable. That seems like the right model going forward.
okay. The last big rule change that we had was obviously the expansion from 4 to 6. And so my two questions are: do we think that there's enough talent to support the now 96 players that are going to be in Premier League? And then the second question there is, how are these players going to be used? Can you sub somebody in for a mixed doubles match? Can you sub somebody in for singles? Or is your lineup set completely, your players set completely before a match?
Yeah. So I'll take the second one first. The level of complexity, strategy, however you want to sort of frame it, I think will be lower at the beginning. And there's like two primary reasons for that. One, let's just use the score ticker thing I was talking about earlier in the podcast. To translate to the fan, like what's happening when Zane subs out for mixed and Thomas comes in and then he's competing, and we flow that through every sort of channel that we have and communicate it to the audience. Like there's no way we're going to do that in year one, nor do I know if that's the right answer. Like there's something to when you buy a ticket to something and you like want to know exactly what you're getting. And if a team decides, oh, actually, like we're gonna sit this player during this match, like we were talking about the NBA, right? Like they have this problem, right? Like I
Huge
come
problem.
from, it's brutal. And so we want to be able to, as clearly as possible, tell the fan what they're getting. And I believe that would then lead us to a point where your lineups are sort of set for the day, let's call it, or maybe the tournament. So I don't think we'll have the sort of substituting within, because we're just not there yet from like a technical standpoint, from a how we communicate with fans standpoint. And when we talk about these ancillary opportunities, sports betting is like a perfect example. Like they have 25, I hear this all the time, like the NBA substitutes, like why can't we? It's like they have 30 years of data that they've been like modeling to like set lines. Like we don't have that. So we have to like start with the most simple format to be able to build that repository in a way that we can eventually get there. But we're definitely not going to be there today. And so I think what you'll see is like more, like I said, lineup set, you know exactly who's playing who or which four, they're playing which four. But player injures themselves, like of course we'll let you substitute, because you know that is the purpose of having a bench. I
Yeah.
hope that teams use 5 and 6, you know, player spots 5 and 6 from like a development standpoint and like a brand business building standpoint. Like go activate locally, like get hyper focused on your community, like ideally draft someone that lives in your market. Because that to me is like the best use of that. If you were to put my league hat on and like how do we grow? Like if we are able to take 16 players times 32 and like have them spread out across those 16 markets locally and like promoting what we're doing, like that is a much, much better outcome for our business and the use of these players than, you know, sort of I'm going to substitute in for like the dream breaker.
Yeah. Well,
And
let me
then,
can I
go ahead.
ask you about that? So fixed we're hoping for a fixed lineup ahead of the match. So you know who you're going to get. But could you have Zane and Will playing men's doubles, and then we draft Zane Ford as well, and Zane Ford is our mixed player. So you have I play men's doubles only. And that lineup is set, but it is you're using two different or three different men's players or women's players throughout the course of a single match. Do you think that that's something we're going to see, or are you going to be stuck with are you going to be set with four players for a given day?
That's still in the like to be figured out imminently. And it like flows through to what I was just saying, right? Like, do we have the ability to interchange those players, you know, even if it's ahead of time and effectively communicate to our fans, our betting partners, everyone else, like what's going on and like why, you know, lines or score lines or names on a ticker need to be changed. So I think the goal is to figure that out soon. Not surprisingly, because teams got to like drop players and draft and all that other stuff. But yeah, I think like you'll see generally us lean towards more. You have to declare the thing that you're doing versus being able to take that action in the moment.
Sure, sure. You're gonna have a hard time with injuries again.
Yeah,
Injuries in air quotes, right? Because if I'm a good men's doubles player but not a great mixed doubles player, you know what's stopping me from getting injured between men's and mixed, right? So that is gonna be an interesting thing to try and figure out, which I was curious about. So
yeah. No, it's a great question. We like you nailed exactly the other sort of opposite effect this could have is like, all right, if we make them be more stagnant, like how are you going to try and like break the rules, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Hmm.
mhm.
Yeah, I think it would be cool to introduce. So you've got 6 players rostered. They're all at the match, and yes, okay, you announce who are the 6 players rostered, but you can configure the teams live throughout the match based on what you see, who the other team is putting out on the court. And I think that just introduces a dynamic where there's more fan theories on how they should structure the individual teams and matches. And I don't know, it just opens up the door for more variables that could potentially create interesting narratives that don't already exist.
Or you could even do every player has to participate once, potentially if you go to it or go to a dream breaker, right?
Yeah.
Um,
No, there's
so that
definitely
way
fun
you don't
ways.
have the issue of like, hey, I came to go see, uh, Thomas.
Thomas got
Well,
big fan
also,
base when our Austin event happens.
yeah. Um, cool. Okay. Can we, anything else on that, Zane?
No, I mean, I think there were a lot of, I think there were a bunch of different questions. Oh, I just have to say thank you for getting rid of the loan thing. I hated that rule from the beginning. I thought it was ripe for collusion. I think it is great that we've gotten rid of the ability to loan players to teams. Thank you for that one. That one deserves that one has no explanation necessary for me.
There we go. Look at that. Four criticisms and a positive. I'll take it. That's a great Zane scorecard.
For conversations,
For
and
conversations.
you've explained well to me the rally scoring. I do think it needs to be revisited in the future, and then the other stuff we're just asking questions to me and just trying to understand to educate our audience. All right,
I love it. I love it.
grow up.
All right, so this CNBC article dropped. It seemed like it was potentially at least somewhat of a response to maybe the bridge loan press, which, by the way, must have been fun for you to navigate, like your first, few days or weeks. I don't know how long you had been in that position, but that was interesting when it happened. And now we've got this CNBC article: Major League Pickleball looks to add teams reach profitability this year. And then there was an interesting statistic about one team. Let's see, on a team by team basis, two of the league's 22 clubs are profitable, and one has reached the break even point. So I like the idea of kind of looking at the individual teams, looking at how they're running their businesses. And I did think it was notable that only two are profitable at this point. That said, it's very difficult to make an individual team profitable. You have to get pretty creative, have a lot of different revenue streams. But what do you think, like those two teams specifically, what do you think they're doing differently to reach profitability, and then that third reaching break even that others aren't?
Yeah. So it's interesting because I had a similar insight, right? Like if you look at things in aggregate, it's like, oh my God, like you can never make money if you're an MLP team. Like there's, plenty of people that I think have that rhetoric or that narrative. The two that are profitable from what we've seen from a success standpoint without like disclosing, because we can't really disclose like team financials, but they are top in class at sponsorship, and they're really, really good at leveraging the other assets in their portfolio to create value. Those, like I would say, are sort of narratively the through lines that we saw as it relates to teams being successful in terms of the business side. And by the way, like not that different than why the Cowboys are the most valuable franchise in all of the NFL, because they also own their stadium. They have a huge practice facility that has real estate component tied to it and hosts the Texas State Finals for football. Like that's the business for a lot of successful, like the Knicks. They are on MSG. They are the owner that owns the media network, owns the team. Like that dynamic exists across sports, and like we're starting, I would argue, not ironically or coincidentally, but like the reality of that's like how you start to build real enterprise value for a sports team. And so those two things are what set those apart. And when you like double click into the spectrum of teams, like for me and my ultimate goal here is the more successful the teams are, the better it is for the league, the better it is for the players. Like this is going to work. It's just a matter of when. And what had me excited is like part of it is just raising the tide of the boats, like get you to shift from the left where you're not doing a ton of revenue more towards like the right end of the spectrum where you're like doing better. And it's on the league to like help with that, get you more slots on TV, get our social following up, have more of an opportunity for you to market players. Okay, now you have 6 players that you can utilize that maybe all average 10 to 20K in social following instead of 4. But yeah, to your original question, pretty amazing that like I mean, it depends if you look at like time frame of MLP teams. I can always consider this like year two. Like year two, we've like started to achieve some of that.
Yeah, well, this is like we're now really starting to see these individual franchises break out as their own businesses, whereas before it was all one collective, and Steve Kuhn and co. were responsible for the P&Ls across the board, but now each individual franchise is making their own decisions and trying to figure out ways to monetize. But I mean, it seems to me like, at least in the interim, you got to build a media property. and events. I don't think merch is going to be anything significant at this point. So it's got to be media, and it's got to be your own events. And I have seen some of the teams really start to double down on the events. I mean, the Ranchers are a good example of, like, I don't know, they had a airplane hangar with like Lil Wayne and celebrities, and they did this whole brand activation, right? Like, that's a splashy thing that you can go to Athletic Greens or Nike or whatever, and you can sell sponsorships into, and it can be decently meaningful.
Totally, totally. And it's what I suggest that teams really need to look at hard is like that local tie-in. Like there's a ton of opportunity in their respective backyards. We're city-based teams. Like, I get it, it's not perfect. We do have a festival style circuit and all that stuff. But there is real money being spent on what the other examples, like team building for like corporate events. Like, pickleball is perfect, right? We always talk about like the community aspect, the wide addressable audience, low barrier to entry in terms of playing competitively. Like, they, I'm sure, would be very interested in hosting a pickleball, many companies, a team building exercise. And if you like branded it around the team, you got Zane who's like dabbing people up and being his sort of personality. Like, now that's like a real package. It's like a real asset. Like, people would be interested in. So I'm with you, man. Like, there's opportunity there. It's now like, let's go use our 22 team business owners to help this thing grow versus like the 3, 4, 5 sort of heads in, the four walls of the league office that are like burdened with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think letting these billionaires free to go run their own teams as much as possible is a great business decision.
Yeah, shift the burden a little bit.
Yeah, man.
So one thing I want to ask about is like viewership. We talk about it a lot. I think I looked up some statistics recently, and it was like, okay, 76% of consumers watch online TV streaming daily. 89% of consumers around the world still watch. That's not what I want. 80% of respondents to a survey prefer streaming services as their primary media consumption method, while 20% still primarily watch linear TV. If you dig into those numbers further, you realize that 20% is 65 and older. So clearly people are moving away from linear TV. However, it's almost like a credential to say, we're on ESPN. But how do you guys think about, okay, one, how do you maximize audience and get maximum distribution to attract new fans while at the same time being able to make money on it? You see a lot of, there's smaller sports leagues now that are moving like strictly to a paid model, right? It's like paywalled. They don't care about the distribution. And I've even seen Pickleball TV. It seems like, okay, now you can pay for this sort of like premium subscription. I don't know if you're ever going to move to fully gated content. But like, how do you guys think through that? What are some of your goals and objectives right now as far as viewership goes?
So I think you mentioned it with Pickleball TV, which I think is key. It's like, first we needed to nail a home for all of this stuff. Like, if you wanted to consume pickleball, it was a nightmare to find it. And look, the Pickleball TV still has work to do. Like, obviously they just launched their app. We all had complaints about trying to find it on Fast Channel and whatever, but like, it's getting better. It's like inarguable that it's like getting easier to find and it's getting into more households. And what's amazing to me is, on that, your site on the digital sort of preference for viewership, the growth in Pickleball TV is insane. Like, to a point where we drive as many viewers for a 8-hour window on a PPA Friday, it's like 11 to 7 is typically when they're broadcasted, as an average NBA team puts on their local media. Like, just take a step back and acknowledge the fact that like, there are that many people consuming Pickleball TV, which is unbelievable, for the fact that it's 7, 8 months old. And look, I get it. Like, sound like a talking head. Like, even I was surprised. Like, I came in here like sort of eyes blind, and I was like, that's impressive. At the same time, Thomas, you said it right. Like, you only tune into Pickleball TV once you know it exists. And like, we have to also build that sort of top of funnel, whatever this marketing analogy is, of like people who just need to understand that pro pickleball exists. And that's where the linear just, is going to always be the best starting point, because at the end of the day, Fox and CBS and ESPN are like in way, way more households. And then my hope and belief is you're going to see a balance in those two things sort of continue over the course of this year, where we'll have more windows on linear, but we'll also be putting out like better content on Pickleball TV. And I'm also not so naive to the fact that like media, like you guys, are like a big part of this like little triangle equation of like how do we get people to care about the sport. And like the NFL, right? Like I nailed this. The NBA like is basically like a drama series disguised as like a live sport. Like we need a little more of that. Like I need a little more like the whose team's dropping. Like Zane, let's get on the podcast and you talk about who you want the fives to drop. Like we have all these freaking player podcasts. Like I'm the one over here like answering side out scoring questions when like I bet you more people want to like hear from the mouths of Tyler and Zane and others. Like, what do you think about your team? What are you guys doing? So I do
To answer
think
that
like
question, Samin, we've decided to drop Annalie.
okay, there you go. Perfect. Breaking news. Anna Lee. Now we're building the free agency show around Anna Lee. Like, you know, she's going first. And so I do think like we got to do a better job of arming all of the people talking about the sport currently. Look, I get it. It's like small. We're not, you know, you guys aren't the size of Bleacher Report or anything else. But like, I fundamentally believe we're going to get there. And we also need to build not just where to tune in live for these matches, but like the drama and the fun that goes along with having a sports league.
Mm-hmm.
So, Samin, along those lines, the pickleball TV numbers are great. I'm looking at the YouTube channel right now, and in post production, the videos that are posted are getting 50 plus thousand views on the regular. But it seems like the YouTube live stream numbers when they're available are always the same few thousand people. That hasn't seemed to change for certainly not as much as we would like to see it change for seemingly months, years even. So how do you balance like pickleball TV numbers skyrocketing, YouTube video numbers skyrocketing, but for me it seems like the live viewership is somewhat stagnant.
Yeah, I think it's because we have our live in so many different places. And so it's like if you wanted to tune into a a live weekend of a tournament, you're probably talking about like four different locations generally where it can live between linear TV, YouTube, Pickleball TV. And I get it, like it's sort of more household penetration, YouTube's accessible to everyone, but I think there's like a balancing act there. And we maybe not are so mature yet that like everyone who's watching knows they need to go to those four different places to do that. And like the NFL can get away with that because like they've done it for 50 or 60 years or whatever. Like everyone knows like, all right, my 1 o'clock games on Fox, my 1 and 4 on CBS, Sunday Night Football's on NBC, Monday Night Football's on ESPN. Like, but again, that's like probably a stretch, not even probably, it's a stretch to like assume that like we have that same level of audience credibility. So I do think that's where you're seeing like pickleball TV grows because like I want to tune into pickleball. I know I can like go here and like it's on. I want to know like I missed the match and I want to see like what Fed did this past weekend. I can like type in Fed pickleball and like YouTube will like tell me exactly what happened and I can click on that video from like latest and see what he did. I do think the live one, it's like, well, is this match on YouTube? Is it on Pickleball TV? Is it on ESPN2? Is it exclusive to Prime? Like, look, we're doing what we can to create awareness, but that's probably where you're seeing the YouTube live streaming numbers takes the brunt of the staying flat, I guess.
Yeah, I'm always kind of disappointed by the live stream numbers, but then I'm super impressed by the post numbers. Right? If we're looking at some of the last handful of videos just from the Masters, you've got Annalie's final at 46,000. You've got the men's final at 105,000, women's final at 73,000, and the mixed final at 87,000. Like those are really, really good numbers in my opinion.
Yeah, no, 100%. So I do think that's like the primary driver in a lot of this, as well as we just need to continue like like telling people what's going on when and like drawing that interest to tune in live.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I've like totaled in the last year 2 weekends of PPA action specifically, and when they put those matches up, you know, in a weekend, 1.5 to 2 million views on those YouTube videos, like that's not nothing. I actually told Pardo that's a huge asset. You should be selling sponsorship directly into those YouTube videos. And then the way the world is moving, does live viewership really matter that much anymore? I mean, maybe you index on live viewership for the Masters or whatever your handful of like marquee events are, which we're still figuring out. And then maybe after that, it's like, well, who cares? A view is a view. Somebody watching for X minutes, who cares if it's live or post? As long as we're getting eyeballs on the product. Maybe there's a world where, okay, for each tournament, yeah, you have some of the events rewatchable on YouTube, and then you gate the rest of them, and you have to pay some sort of subscription, and then there's another revenue stream. So you do get the distribution, you do get people watching the events that really matter, but the people who want to watch all of them, well, they're clearly fans enough that why wouldn't they pay $10 a month or something like that to get access to that content?
Yeah, I think that's like generally right. I think what I'm always cognizant of and articulating internally a lot too is like we still need to raise the ceiling, right? And then once we get the fan in the funnel, we can like figure out what the best model is for them or for that, group demographic, whatever it might be. But our North Star still needs to be like awareness and eyeballs, awareness and eyeballs. Like we just have to drive towards getting our product in front of more people.
Yeah. I I envision a day where we're like in a bar on a Sunday night and the whole bar is there to watch and just like a college football championship or something like that, right? I don't think I've seen this up to this point, but it'll be fun when we finally reach that day.
I think it's coming. It's I'm with you. That is like what I hope to create because what you get out of college football and football in general is it's not it's like the culture around the sport is exciting. Like how many times do you like I was just talking about this to my wife. It's like how many times do I like hit someone I'm like, "Hey, let's go catch this NBA game at a bar." And like I love the NBA. It's like my favorite sport. I grew up with it. Like it's my barrier to entry into society. But that's like rare unless it's the playoffs. And then of course if it's like the Lakers, Warriors, like I'll hit someone and be like, yo, let's go check this out. But like football is like naturally ingrained that into culture.
Oh yeah,
And I hope we can get there with pickleball because it's like perfect 2 hour window. It's exciting. It's like you get to see something that maybe a bunch of you are doing on your day-to-day lives, and so you feel like, oh, like after the game I go and like I catch the MLP match or the PPA match, like I can start to see that.
yeah. Um, all right, last thing I've got. I'm just curious about the two franchises you want to offload. So in the merger, there was a buyback, right? So UPA bought back two of the franchises. So now those two franchises sit under UPA ownership, and you're trying to find new ownership groups. How do you go about doing that? What types of buyers are you looking for? I think we know that previously one of the goals was we want a marquee name, right? A big name that kind of creates headlines. But are you guys still thinking about it that way? Does it matter? And like, what kinds of buyers are you looking for? What's important when you look at new ownership groups?
Yeah, I think like what I took from, and worked on this with the WNBA, when you like consider expansion, it's you have to balance and juggle these like multiple criteria. And there's like the splashy awareness piece of it, there's the competitive sort of piece of it in terms of dilution, and then there's the like where are you going and like can these new owners help you get there? And so for us, like the big takeaway was really the fact that A, 2024, if you were to like analyze it through the lens of it being a merger year, like was amazing. And the fact that we were able to hit our revenue goals, have over 300,000 people come out to events, like it was extremely successful. And so that layered with what I feel like is a really compelling schedule for 2025 made us think about, look, is it time to really start to look ahead? Look at us. Like we're looking at 2026 already. Like in January of 25, we're talking about 2026. Like again, like a fundamental difference from where we were in the past. And like it behoove us to start to explore expansion opportunities? And I think we looked around the table and we're like, it's time to like revisit that. And we haven't had an expansion opportunity since the bidding of those teams was done in 2022. It's been over 2 years that anyone has had a chance to like get in and buy a team into pro pickleball. And then the landscape of pro sports has like changed a ton where you either got to have like billions, like multi-billions to get in that top asset class. And they're starting to become like a middle with the WNBA franchise values, the tail end of Major League Soccer, women's soccer league, etc. But there isn't like anyone else at sort of a less than $50 million check, let's call it. And I think we slot in like extremely nicely into that category in as such that we talked about the grassroots side and like how quickly it's growing. Let's acknowledge the fact that we're in like year 4 or 5 of existing as a pro league. Broadly, I would argue we're in like year 2 of like actually having like successful businesses around teams. And I think what we really want out of an ownership group is what I talked about at the beginning of what makes other ownership groups successful, like double down local, be willing to build out the business side as well as having, GMs and coaches and all of that stuff, and give us a chance to like increase that reach into other markets. Like there isn't a team in Seattle, there isn't a team in Houston, there isn't a team in Philly or Boston. Like there's tier 1 cities that
Detroit.
we have yet to, crack and get, a foothold in. So what would you say?
Just Detroit. Just don't know.
Yeah, Detroit, 100%.
Okay, but by the way, that's not really those two franchises. It's not like they don't exist right now. They exist. They're just under UPA. Right?
Like the rights to the team are under UPA.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But like that's not expansion. It's just a new ownership group.
Yeah,
right. You're not expanding the number of franchises. Yeah, right. My only other question: why even at this point have Challenger and Premier? I didn't realize that all were going to move to Premier. Maybe I did. Maybe we had talked about that. I kind of just forgot. But by next year, all teams will be Premier, right?
It's like a delicate balance. Like Zane could probably opine on this, like, and fact check me here a little. So the thesis behind why starting with it was to allow for the talent pool to continue to mature at the rate at which the league was sort of continuing to advance. And so we landed in a situation where we had like 24 teams. We're like, all right, we probably can't have 96 players all at one level. Like we just weren't there in 2023. And so we said, let's start with 12 and 12. That'll put sort of 48 players in a group and kind of bifurcate the next 48 players below that. And what's, I think, kind of interesting is next year, let's just speak in starters for now. So it's going to be 16 in Premier, let's say 4 starters per team. So that's 64 players. I think it's like a pretty compelling argument that there were 16 players that weren't drafted in Premier last year that are good enough to compete in Premier now. It might not be exactly 16. Maybe it's a little below, maybe it's a little bit above, but it's like pretty damn close. And so I think to your question, we just want to make sure we're not like diluting the product too quickly, but allowing for new entrants. And we talked about Sofia and other players like to continue to come into the sport, get reps, and like feel like they can compete at that level, while ensuring that the like sort of ceiling or the average of the product quality stays high. What do you think, Zane? Do you think like 16, like is it like that's like a pretty good over-under line for players that weren't in Premier last year that could probably be drafted to that this year?
Yeah, I mean, if you look back at the history of MLP, year 1, 2021, we struggled to have. It's always been a little bit more of a struggle on the female side. It hasn't been quite as deep as the men's side. But first year, we struggled with even 16 females, and so like if you were to expand to 100 players back in 2021, you would have been picking up local 4-5s that were playing, right, and so. The talent pool is growing, and it's growing unbelievably fast. But as part of my question earlier, I don't think there's 96 Premier level players ready right now. I think that there are 64, and I think that the bench players or the 5th and 6th players per roster are, potentially going to struggle or have to grow into that role. So yeah, you have to wait for the talent pool to catch up. So I do think that like eventually having all Premier would be great. I would love to see after we have a fully developed Premier League, I would love to see adding an actual Challenger League, right? And an under league. I do find that that's super compelling for promotion, relegation. You can't have the rebuilding years all the time. The selling players, the Oakland Athletics type of deal. I think having a Challenger League eventually again would be awesome. You can sell those teams as well under the full umbrella. I don't know whether that's even something being considered in the long term, and it's not something that U.S. sports really seem to do, but it's huge internationally. So yeah, I think that was a perfect answer for that one. Just the talent pool has to catch up, and if we were to expand completely to Premier right now, it would be a serious issue with some of these teams just getting slaughtered by some of the top teams.
Yeah.
Zane, anything else you want to argue with Samin about?
No, I like arguing with Samin. But Samin, I have to ask one more question. Do you have any regrets of some of the tweets that you've had back and forth with Jilly B?
I mean, could I have framed them differently? Sure. At the same time, like we're in such a nascent state that I think people sometimes don't appreciate the like repercussions of like what they say publicly. And like the fact that like we have hundreds of employees here, right? Who are all sort of helping like grow this business. And when you want to take a sort of stance that candidly lies about like the state of what we're doing, like it affects people's livelihood. Could I have framed them differently? Yes, I can happily own up to that piece of it. At the same time, like I do think a lot of what I said like needed to be said, and all like you got to defend the business, and like I stand by it. Like I just picked up my family and moved them from Brooklyn to Dallas. I had an amazing, job working for Kevin Durant, Rich Kleiman, and like came all in on pickleball because I believe in this thing. So were the tweets like, to Thomas's point, fun and kind of thing to take on day two or whatever it was on the job? Like, that was an experience for sure. But I do fundamentally believe like we gotta make sure that the facts around our business are like getting out there and like to the right people.
I am personally all for Dana White-esque interactions there. So I don't think I texted you. Maybe I did. I can't recall. I know I texted Connor. I was like, "Yeah, dude, you just Dana White'd this situation. I think you see CEOs, personality CEOs are a real thing. I'm I'm for it.
Yeah, man. I
Yeah.
mean, and like part of it is this, right? Like I would love, probably weird competitive balance, but like I said, man, we got all these player pods. Like I want to know what's going on with your team. Like, what are you guys? Are you worried about getting dropped? Like those are the conversations I'm more excited to have. And like if it takes freaking me being a podcast touring CEO to like challenge our players to talk about themselves and their situations because they all got these platforms, like let's hear it, baby.
For sure. Somebody has to.
Somebody's got to.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Zane, anything else?
Long live rally scoring. No, just kidding. No, Savid, appreciate it. We'll be looking forward to freeing the chainsaw and bringing rally scoring back. But I do appreciate you explaining through a bunch of this different stuff. And I think it was questions that I obviously had, and I think a lot of people had. So we are super appreciative of your time.
For sure. Appreciate it, guys.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah.